morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar. My name is Michelle Butterworth. I'm the Customer Success Manager for SigniFlow South Africa, and I will be your host for today. I'm joined by my co-host, Greg Orrell, our Regional Director for our UK operations. Just some housekeeping before we get started. We'd love to hear your questions. So if you can please enter them into the message section under your Zoom control panel. Greg will make sure that we get to them during the webinar, and there'll also be some time for questions at the end. So today's webinar is about unlocking digitization's hidden expenses, and we'll be unpacking how traditional e-sign licensing models can erode your digital transformation budgets. I'll be interviewing Leon van der Merwe, our Group CIO and co-founder of SigniFlow Software. Leon has 20 years experience in the ICT industry, a true technocrat and strategist who has spent the last 10 years focusing on cryptographic technologies to drive business process automation. In other words, digitization and automation runs in his blood. Leon also firmly believes that every company will one day run paperlessly. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Leon. Leon, thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts, views, and experience on this very important topic.
Good morning, Michelle. Thanks for having me. I assume the CEO of DocuSign was not available for this interview.
So, Leon, SigniFlow is a paperless business. Can you tell us what the journey was like since you started development of SigniFlow in 2014?
Yeah, very good question. It's been an interesting journey. You know, saying a business is paperless is almost like saying that your shoes are clean just because they've been polished. It may appear nice and shiny on top, but there will always be a part that sort of treads on dusty floors. Look, I think we're further down the road than most and maybe a bit less than some others. I can say at best that we do not make use of any printers or scanners. We send far fewer emails. We use less document storage as our documents are shared and not duplicated. But we do use paper from time to time, mostly because of exterior factors, which one cannot always control until everyone has fully adopted a digital strategy. However, I do believe that we've reached a point of truth in digitization, where all our macro processes in our business runs fully digital. Boiling it down, this can be attributed probably to two main factors. The first and probably the most important is the people. Once the entire team is on board, digitization becomes very, very easy. The second is IT systems. In most cases, not just one system, but multiple systems, each doing its part in contributing to your overall strategy. Our company is part of a larger group, so it has taken us probably 3 to 5 years, which really accelerated during the pandemic. I think this was probably the case with most businesses. However, when we talk to these businesses now, in retrospect, many are questioning whether the hasty decisions taken in 2020 were in fact, the right ones. You yourself sit with me in a lot of these meetings and discussions with clients and potential clients. And as you know, many companies have not progressed for many reasons. They seem to still only have what they implemented in 2020. And some, sadly, as people return to the office, so that their old habits. So lack of leadership buy-in to digitalization can also cause some regression.
Yeah, that reminds me of the joke you always make that the only paper SigniFlow buys is toilet paper, and it's no joke. When I walked into SigniFlow a year ago, there wasn't a printer in sight, and I had to rip the phonetic alphabet off the wall just to have a piece of paper to write on. So I'm admitting it in public. It was me.
Okay. Now we know.
So let's jump into licensing. So as you mentioned, I've also met a couple of customers who've rushed into buying digital signature tools in 2020, but many are reassessing the digital licensing models that they've signed up for. Can you tell us how digital signature tools are typically licensed?
So, Michelle, when we sort of think back a few years, your document management, your workflow licensing, they were typically done on a server or a business level, based maybe on the number of users in the company. The business would then install the software and very seldomly were there any limitations as to the number of workflows or documents that they could use in the system. This effectively allowed the business to use the system without the fear of escalating costs. Now, if we look at most electronic signature software licenses today, which in essence fulfill a similar role in the business, there's quite a big difference in the licensing. With most of the e-sign solutions being cloud-based offerings only, coupled with the increase in demand, the market experienced a drastic change in models and an increase in pricing. Now, according to Gartner's Market Guide for Electronic Signatures, the e-signature workflow model has become largely commoditized, which coincides obviously with the model that we see being pushed by most vendors. Now, this model is referred to as a consumption-based billing, in which you pay for a certain number of signatures or documents or a collective of documents, which some refer to as an envelope. These envelopes are transactions-based, which is most often also a use or lose type of scenario, meaning a quantity of transactions which must be consumed in a given period, like a month or a year. This effectively means then that every user releases a document for approval or for signature, pay anywhere between $2 and $4 per envelope. Even if the envelope only contains a single document, you still pay for the whole envelope. Now, it's almost like paying the post office the maximum postage fee for large envelopes, even if you're only sending a birthday card. Now, in essence, there's nothing really wrong with consumption-based licensing, especially for smaller businesses that have low volumes. For instance, if they only use it to send contracts to customers occasionally. But if you want to use the software more widely to digitize your processes like internal applications or finance approvals, or you want to create transactional audit samples, then the consumption-based models can become very, very expensive.
I'd like to get back to that just now when we talk about budgets. Can you tell us a little bit about what features come at an additional cost?
So this usually differs from application to another, but in general, you'll find that features are very similar, like your document workflow, your approvals, signature collections, and so on. However, when you want the e-signature application to integrate via API with your business systems, or you want to plug it into your Office 365 environment, or your CRM system, or you want single sign-on with your Microsoft ID, this is now where the additional costs start mounting, as none of these typically include this in any of your standard license models. We also see basic electronic signatures are typically included, but digital signatures with higher non-repudiation are being charged for additionally, and in most cases, very unnecessarily so. I think in certain cases, certificate authorities or CAs push their core business agenda, which is to sell digital signing certificates, without first assessing whether the customer really needs it or not, and without offering built-in digital signatures, which is available in many digital signature applications. So I think just doing a little homework up front, partnering with a trusted e-sign vendor to understand what you are buying can really take you a long way.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to remember. I also think that support is another important aspect to highlight, as some vendors include support in their core pricing, while others charge considerable support fees. Do you come across that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about budgeting, as the consumption-based model is quite relevant. How do these traditional e-sign licensing models affect your ability to budget?
Well, how long is a piece of string? I think very few businesses really know their usage volumes upfront. So they end up overspending on budget, or they end up going back to paper or even semi-digital processes for the everyday tasks. This is largely due to escalating costs, misaligned type of licensing. We hear it so often from digitization managers and project owners and business owners that had really great plans a few years ago to digitize the entire business, and how they had to shrink their ideas to now fit in, once they start realizing the actual cost of transaction billing. This is obviously not where you want to end up. It's also not necessary. If you scope the right tools for your business, this won't be the case.
So I guess this is one reason why so many digitization projects fail, this inability to budget effectively.
Absolutely, and aligning that budget with the right tool. That's extremely important.
Yes, yes. I'd like to turn a little bit to Gartner now. So Gartner released their report in July 2022, the Market Guide to Electronic Signatures. And in it, SigniFlow was singled out as one of only a handful of global vendors who offer alternative licensing-based model. Can you elaborate?
So the guide starts off by mentioning, and I quote, many organizations, have rushed to select and deploy electronic signature capabilities in 2020 are reassessing the value provided by the electronic signature solution and whether it makes sense to pay for a premium product in a commoditized market. It then goes on to recognize SigniFlow and mSigner for offering alternative options like self-hosted models. Now, self-hosted is somewhat ambiguous term, and this is where things really start getting interesting. So many may argue that a self-hosted model are a little antiquated, or they do not fit in with modern cloud migration strategies, but it's really not the case. Self-hosted do not only refer to on-premise, it simply means that the customer or the customer's cloud provider, like Microsoft Azure or Amazon, or even the company's website hosting provider or the Office 365 Microsoft partner, they provide the hosting platform as a service and not the e-signature vendor. So this in turn then allows for the e-signature vendor to open the license and extend enterprise license functionality, like unlimited transactions or unlimited documents, envelopes, unlimited uploads of documents, and unlimited users on a single license, even at flat rate annual license fees. You must keep in mind that an e-signature vendor are internet companies, and it makes profit from hosting the software for companies. So it will always be more cost effective to get the hosting direct from a hosting provider, which in turn then unlocks the enterprise licensing models, which are just way more cost effective.
Yeah, it sounds a bit like you're taking us back to the old days of licensing, as you described in the beginning, when there were no limitations on the licenses.
It is exactly that. It is exactly that, except you don't have to take an old CD and pop it into the server. You can still do this sort of as part of your cloud strategy, but just unlocking that license capabilities that we were used to in a far more effective way.
Yeah, I think you're revealing our age.
I didn't say floppy drive, I said
well, 1.44 SIFI drive.
There you go.
So in the Gartner report, they also state that there's been an increase in low complexity, high volume use cases where the traditional pay-per-user model or the pay-per-transaction model is difficult to justify. Can you comment on that part of the report?
Yeah, absolutely, Michelle. So not every document has to be signed. We used to signing almost everything because that was the way that we authenticated ourselves on paper. When you start looking at digital identity, user authentication, digital audit logging of events, timestamping, and so on that you get in these systems, it becomes clear that low complexity, high volume processes can be digitized by what we call click approvals. It eliminates the need for a document to ever really be signed. Now, typical e-signature consumption-based models do not differentiate. It just keeps charging either way, which becomes expensive, and in most cases, it's simply unaffordable for most companies that's on a digitization journey.
Yeah, I think you made a valid point. It's important to remember that not everything has to be signed. Yes.
Absolutely.
Quite interestingly, Gartner also states that companies shouldn't be scared to take a multi-vendor approach when purchasing digital signature software. Do you agree with this statement?
Yeah, they do. And we find this in some use cases where customers run various tools that are similar, each to address maybe a very specific use case, which a specific tool may be better at or more economical for that specific use case. For instance, some platforms are more cost effective when it comes to contract signing, where others might be more geared towards digitization and automation, which could lead to both coexisting in a single ecosystem. This approach can definitely save an organization money, but take into consideration, it most often comes at the expense of the user, which as a result must now log into different systems to complete different tasks. And that's not necessarily, could be a little bit on the counterproductive side.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for highlighting the importance of the user experience in this approach. I'd just like to take a little bit of a break now and ask Greg. Greg, can you check if there's any questions for Leon at this point?
Hey, Michelle. Yeah, there's a couple of questions here. Some of them we'll answer directly, but here's two good ones. How does SigniFlow help businesses who don't have the resources to integrate with our product?
So integration projects are usually, pre-scoped. We've got analysis, business analytics teams, architecture teams, etc., that work with the customers. We assess what the scope of the digitalization project will look like, and we work together with the customer, and most often customer and external vendors, to ensure that there's sort of a successful digitization process and project, break it into smaller pieces, and then obviously coupling that with the right licensing that fits that exact organization, which is more than possible in all cases.
Okay, excellent. And the second one was around, are you seeing an increase in market demand for this type of enterprise licensing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, as Gartner also mentioned, that if people are reassessing at the moment in terms of what they've got, and looking back and saying, well, is it really worth it to pay every time that someone clicks a button? It just doesn't make sense. So we do see an increase. We see a massive increase in just the adoption of digitization. Some of our clients have gone from a 40% adoption to a 80, even 90% adoption rate from their customers. And, that sort of goes hand in hand with that.
Excellent. Yeah, those are the two main ones, Michelle.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks. So Leon, I like this one. I know that digitization and automation runs in your blood, but can you tell us what the differences are between the two?
Sure. So processes exist in every business. Some are still paper-based. Others we find are semi-digital, using fillable PDFs and emails to send documents to employees and to customers, sometimes expecting them to fill it in, approve it, print it, sign it, scan it, email it, etc. So process digitization is looking at each process in the business and fully digitizing it with software that has the ability to keep the process digital end to end. No matter how many people internally or external to the organization are involved, no matter how many departments in the business are part of the specific process, and then most processes involve multiple departments or role players that each deliver a very set piece of that entire overall process. For instance, a process may start in sales, like sending a customer a quote. Then it moves external to the customer for approval or sign-off, or even uploading purchase orders. Then back internally again to legal for sales contracts and NDAs, etc. Then to the procurement department for stock orders, etc. And it most often ends up in the finance department that then needs to sort of execute invoicing and billing. So an effective process digitization needs to cater for all of this. Everyone involved has to have access and a holistic view of the end-to-end process. Where process automation is, that's where you take a repetitive human task, like when a vehicle is sold. It is mostly the same set of contracts that must be executed. It's only the customers that differ on each. And you automate the execution of these tasks using API-led integration. It enables fast execution and then obviously much reduced manual effort. So a fully automated process usually ends up with very little to no human effort. Every step is automated. It's driven by business systems, decision engines, or a set of rules that determine what the next step within the automation process would be.
Let's elaborate first a little bit on digitization. How should companies go about designing their digitization strategy?
Michelle, I would say the best sort of practice would be first need to take a look at each process in detail. It helps to start with processes that are paper heavy or slow or still semi-digital. Map the process step by step, starting with the desired result and then sort of working backwards, listing every role and task involved in the process. Then look at software that caters for the needs of these use cases. it's very important that the tool is flexible in its design. It must be able to adapt to change in personnel, in future alignment of digitization and automation strategies. And that the tool, the cost of the tool, it mustn't hamper the digitization strategy by breaking the budget as your volumes increase, because your volumes will increase as time goes. So I suggest you work with the big ones first, and then you'll find many of the smaller ones tend to automatically just start falling in place as people get used to the system and they start launching their own initiatives that make their own lives easier. It's a good idea to completely eradicate the old process. People are creatures of habit. You know, it's easier to fall back on the old process than invest time in learning a new one. So once they understand the new process, and they often cannot believe that they ever did it the old way. So that's where I'll start.
I guess change management is important here to consider.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Change management and then understanding the process. And through digitization, you can make that process better than what it was done in any of the older-fashioned ways.
Sure. So any companies who are intending on embarking on a full automation strategy, what do they need to take into account?
Yeah, so automation is definitely a bit more complex. Similarly, you need to map out the process first. I would suggest finding an experienced partner that can assist you in modeling the process. We and most of the modern automation software companies believe that due to the complexities that you find within various different IT architectures, that API-led integration is the only way forward. Most processes are triggered by some form of a manual capture, like a web form or an onboarding application, that in turn then pushes that captures data back into business systems for manual execution. So most modern business systems like your ERP systems, your document management system, content management systems, they have built-in capability to kickstart the automation, but they often lack the sophistication to present a smooth digital experience for both the employees and the customers. And there's importance in what I said there. Again, finding the right software partner with the right tool set that's flexible, scalable, within your budget is key to a successful automation project.
I think the lesson here from you is if automation is your end goal, you need to choose a vendor that has the ability to automate and who will also align closely with your automation strategies.
Absolutely. Not everybody is focused on automation. Digitization, workflow, etc. That's one thing. Automation, something quite different.
Sure. I'd like to talk a little bit about ROI now, return on investment, as most companies need to justify the cost of purchasing software. What are some of the ROI metrics to look out for?
I like that you asked me this question. You always hate it when people ask you this question. Okay, let's go. So, you know, we often get asked this question, and we can look sort of into the trivial answers to this question that you can also find in a lot of your online ROI calculators, etc. Like what savings can you expect per page or per paper document, or ink when you're not printing, or time saved looking for a hard file copy versus an electronic copy. But these are usually quite inaccurate. They're not realistic in all cases, and they don't apply to everyone. And it's really far more than that. These are easily quantifiable elements. I believe that for a business to stay competitive in today's changing marketplace, automation and digitization have become more than just a nice to have. It's become vital to the success of any modern business operations. You know, we have become conditioned. Everyone is accustomed to receiving electronic contracts and ordering goods online and approving banking transactions on an app. This has now resulted in employees looking inward and starting to question why their own internal processes are slow and so manual. And then we get to the customer. They similarly expect a fast digital experience when they're dealing with your company, or they just quickly switch to your competitor that offers a better experience. So effectively designing business process digitization and automation can really help you achieve successful digital operations within your business. And it allows for highly engaging digital experiences that customers demand these days. So I think it's key that both your employees and your customers have a similar digital experience when they're working in or with your company. because that hugely contributes to a healthy, sustainable digital business.
Yeah, I think it's quite vital that you highlighted the employee's journey being just as important as the customer journey. I think people forget about the employee journey quite often.
Absolutely. And if there's a disconnect between the employee's digital journey and the customer's digital journey, then the employee doesn't buy in. It needs to be aligned, and the experiences need to be aligned in order for employees also to deliver the right service to the customer. So the customer's experience is much different, then the employee can't relate.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Just before we cut to questions again, can you tell us how traditional versus enterprise models affect your ROI calculations?
So, Michelle, traditional models simply do not offer the savings, to justify a full end-to-end digitization or end-to-end automation. Enterprise licensing models are mostly at a flat rate, meaning it's one price, designed to fit your specific business, your business requirements, and even your budget. So it has a huge impact on the overall long-term cost of end-to-end digitization and automation. So I can, only urge business owners, project owners, financial managers, and it really doesn't matter the size of your company. You need to do these calculations and inspections up front. Do product comparisons, set budgets before making final decisions on which road to travel. I think ultimately, to ensure a successful digital future for your business and its customers, those are things that you need to keep in mind and execute beforehand.
Thanks, Leon, for sharing your insights and experience. As you said, these traditional models simply don't offer the savings, especially if you're considering end-to-end digitization. I'd like to hand over to Greg. Greg, could you check if there are any more questions for Leon?
There's not at the moment, Michelle. All the other questions we've kind of handled directly and answered directly. But I think everybody was engaged. That was really good.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, that's a wrap. Please remember to visit our events section at signiflow.com for more upcoming webinars. And if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to contact us at questions@signiflow.com. That's questions@signiflow.com. And thank you again for attending, and have a wonderful day further.